Solar Hunters, another big player in the meta, and another subclass with a whole host of exotic armor options. Some which modify supers, while others affect different parts of the kit. Just Throwing Knives have 3 exotics devoted to simply that, for some reason. So which of these should you use, and in what content? First up, what I would think to be the most popular exotic right now, and one which got quite the glow up this season, while it wasn't even that bad before, the Celestial Nighthawk. As I'm sure most of you know, it condenses the Marksman Golden Gun into a single high damage shot, perfect for burst DPS, and has received these changes. The base super damage increased by 25%, and now also provides between 1.5 to 4.5% super energy per precision final blow while out of super. So quick access to supers, and they are now more devastating. While simple and effective enough, this exotic does have content where it shines, and then other content where it doesn't. You need the targets which are actually worth using the single shot provided. Raid bosses, Grandmaster Nightfalls, dungeon bosses. Those sort of things. Also, be sure to utilise the mod Heart of the Flaming group settings. It's up to 20% free extra super damage by simply being near allies. Overall, a fantastic solo hunter option, and if you can benefit from its insanely high burst damage it provides, then you absolutely should. Expect this one to continue to see very high usage. Now Shards of Galanor is the other side of the same coin. Instead of Golden Gun, the improvements this time are to Blade Barrage. And instead of super energy on precision final blows, it's instead on any type of throwing knife final blow. And while Celestial is all about precision and choosing your target, Galanor doesn't really care. There's no such thing as too many throwing knives. Its main super altering effect is energy is returned on hits or final blows with the Blade Barrage super, so you can hit a group of adds or throw them all into a single boss target. Energy will be returned either way, and it's not uncommon to get 50% back as long as you're hitting something. This makes Galanor quite adaptable to any PvE content in game, and is just there to enhance the regular solo hunter gameplay loop. While it's not either the greatest damage or best ad clear super, it's pretty close enough, especially for how often you can utilise it. Quick note on this exotic and the next few, as they all heavily utilise throwing knives, either any or a specific kind. And for any build which is using a lot of throwing knives, I highly recommend these aspects and fragments. First up, the aspect Knock 'em Down. It allows for knife final blows to fully refund melee energy, and it also increases super potency, but basically never unequip this one. And for fragments, Ember of Singeing is clutch for refunding melee energy if you did not land a final blow. Scorching a target will quickly refund class ability energy, and then you can use that with Gambler's Dodge to refund a melee charge. Ember of Tortures will provide Radiant upon hitting any target of a powered melee, thus meeting the criteria for Knock 'em Down. You can also use Flint Striker to grant Radiant, however that is only for this season. And so yeah, these next 3 exotics are all focused around throwing knives. And to be real, 2 out of 3 of them are not so great, while the other one is actually pretty good. So see if you can guess which of the 3 is a good one. Caliban's Hand. This one gives proximity knives the ability to either apply Scorch or instantly ignite on final blows. Athrys Embrace. This one allows for weighted knives to bounce and track targets. Rapid weapon precision hits increase weighted knives damage, as well as making them stagger unstoppable champions. And Ophidia Spathe. This one grants an extra melee charge. And throwing knife final blows increase throwing knife damage. So more on each. Caliban's Hand is at its best when you can consistently land final blows with proximity knives. But these aren't really the hardest hitting of throwing knives, so realistically I'd put it more as a 4 fun exotic in lower difficulty content. Like, don't get me wrong, it is really fun when it works, but you will struggle to utilise this as much as other exotic options in more challenging content. The second part of this exotic's effect will recharge melee energy at a hugely increased rate if you have a proximity knife on the field which is unexploded. So most of the time this is if you missed the target. It's also nice to have, but again a perk which activates on misses rather than rewarding hits is maybe not so good. I know it's supposed to be so that you can use a proximity knife as a trap for enemies to walk into, but I just don't see this as effective gameplay. Athrys Embrace benefits weighted throwing knives. Now these ones are the heavy hitters of the bunch, though things are more promising. The effect is also exceptionally easy to activate. Land 3 crits with any weapon to gain strengthened throwing knife. This will enable weighted throwing knives to deal 200% increased damage, bounce off surfaces with additional tracking, and stun unstoppable champions. And while you do have to use weighted knives here, I think these probably are the preferred option of the bunch regardless, as they have the following effects. Instantly trigger an ignition if they hit a scorched target, which is very easily applied this season using Kindling Trigger. Precision Final Blows will fully recharge class ability energy, which can also be used in the future to get more melee charges, and they just hit harder. Naturally more of a chance of a final blow, which will return full melee energy while radiant. So this exotic can do better in more difficult content, and the unstoppable stun effect could also be a nice utility to have, but I don't really think they actually do enough. The knife itself is providing most of the benefits, with this exotic just being a slight boost. You can still do quite a lot of a gameplay loop with a different exotic, which leads us on to the Ophidia Spathe. This one's the actually good throwing knife exotic. And why? I think it's because it's a lot more lenient than the other options, and does more than enough to enable a few different playstyles. So like if you want to main Genji without re-downloading Overwatch, which trust me, don't do that, you can with Knife Trick. If you want to spam ignitions by repeatedly throwing weighted knives, then that's also an option. Having 2 knife charges is a huge benefit, especially when it comes to using Gambler's Dodge. This will restore both charges at once. Having multiple knives at the ready also really helps with this exotic's new buff it received at the start of Season 23. Landing a knife final blow will grant a damage buff to subsequent knives, up to 3 stacks, with damage increase values at 30%, 60%, then 100%. So with charges being readily available and refreshable, the damage can ramp up easily. Using your class ability will also refresh this buff's duration. So it turns out, all you really needed to make a knife exotic good was more knives. I mean, who could have guessed? And Ophidia is also pretty universally strong as it's adaptable to the content. Easier content, the knife trick spam build is really fun, while harder content will be more suited to the weighted knife ignition setup. I have a video on this one too in the description, but just be sure to use solar artifact mods this season to make it even more potent. And the final solar exotic option, we're finally away from melee abilities, and it's the young Ahamkara Spine. I gotta have a quick rage here about the absolute guttering these got because of the PvP changes a while back. If it was still in their previous state, would PvP players actually even be using these? Or would it still be, the endless threadling spam we now have? No one really knows, but also I was actually quite pleasantly surprised how potent these can still be. It does require a little bit of building into, but it's a good path to take. Biggest change is now grenade energy restoration only applies on ability final blows, and has a very short but important 0.3 of a second cooldown. All this really means is you cannot fully restore grenade energy on a single ability, but you can quickly restore it with a few back-to-back powered melee kills. The trip mines themselves are still quite effective though. I've had great fun with this exotic even in Master Loss sectors, so they do hold up pretty well. I'm not saying it's really the best thing in the game, it's a fair bit away from that, but the gameplay loop is fun and rewarding. Outside of these, solar hunters don't have much for grenade support, and while you could use the aspect gunpowder gamble, to be really relevant I think it just needs its own keybind option. The amount of times I threw the gunpowder gamble while wanting to use a regular grenade ability accidentally was a bit too much. So I think it's just best to stick to trip mine spam, and that's all the solar based exotics available to hunters. Right now I do think we're in a Celestial Nighthawk kind of meta, with Ophidia Spathe or Ahamkara Spine being the best options for heavy ability builds. Of course, the neutral exotics such as Lucky Pants will remain ever strong if that's something you'd prefer to use. And I've rated all of these exotics in terms of effectiveness in different pieces of Destiny 2 PvE content. Note that just because something isn't rated as high doesn't mean it's useless. You can pretty much make anything work in Destiny with the right setup. It's more so just how simple and build changing an exotic can be at its best. alongside what enemies you will be expected to face in each piece of content. Easy to clear enemies favour ability looping options, while tougher enemies might call for the high damage of Celestial Nighthawk. Thank you for watching.